So in general, folks know who dreamers are, right? In general, yes? This is amazing because that hasn't always been true. And I never go to a place where I have to explain who dreamers are anymore, which is amazing. And that is because dreamers have been so brave in telling their own stories. DACA, and this is actually legally really important, is not a program. It's an exercise in enforcement authority, right? So this is the DHS, the enforcement authority, is basically saying, there are 11 million people here without immigration papers. It's a lot of people. And even though Congress gives DHS a lot of money to enforce the law against people who are deportable, we're not going to deport 11 million people. So we have to make choices. There have to be priorities. And so what the Obama administration said was people who have, criminal convictions are going to be higher priorities, but there are people who are lower priorities, and we're going to name some of those characteristics as well. And DACA is essentially an expression of that. So, but what DACA recipients are doing...
What's the acronym?
Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. The deferred action part refers to deferring action on their deportation, right? So these are people with the courage to stand up and say, I am here, I'm deportable, I am asking you to defer acting on my deportation and to give me the ability to work legally in the United States because you're acknowledging that I'm not going anywhere. That's what DACA is. And it was really important to us to be clear about what it was as people were applying, because it took some courage for people to do that. And we had no idea the extent to which people would come forward, because it's a fairly scary thing for reasons that we now know all too well. And we kicked the tires really hard on whether the agency would be able to implement it successfully before we made this announcement. But it's an exercise in enforcement authority. It's renewable every 2 years, and the reason for that is, again, legally we knew we were going to get sued, and we knew we were going to have to be able to show that this wasn't permanent, that these were individual decisions. We weren't granting people something as a class. So we kicked the tires very hard on what our legal authorities were, but it is a very aggressive use of enforcement authority, using a tool that's been used by lots of administrations before, but using it in a much more assertive way. And those were hard decisions, and the results in people's lives and for the country has been extraordinary, really extraordinary. Mm-hmm. And look, it's been unthinkable for DACA to be revoked for 5 years. And here we are. Mm-hmm.
So what happens next? Where do we go? What's your crystal ball?
The honest answer is I don't know for sure, but I do know that we have a chance to get the DREAM Act passed that we cannot let slip through our fingers. Mm-hmm. And if anybody would have told me a year ago that I would say the words, we have a chance to get the DREAM Act passed by Christmas, I would have thought you were out of your minds. Mm-hmm. But the fact is that we do. And so the challenge is, the reason we have that opportunity is because the president has done this unthinkable thing and created a deadline that he didn't need to create. That if Congress doesn't act, 800,000 people and their families and their communities and their workplaces will all be harmed. So he's created a crisis. We know there's bipartisan support for the DREAM Act. We know actually lots of Republicans who desperately believe that it would be terrible for this bad thing to happen and to have their fingerprints on it. And there is must-pass legislation which has to happen by the end of the year to keep the government funded and on the debt limit. So those are the ingredients which create the possibility of legislative relief. But I will say that I have never seen, I've been working on immigration policy for more than 30 years. I've never seen immigration legislation that has any element of generosity towards anybody that doesn't also have other stuff. I suspect that other stuff is likely to be border enforcement, which is different than enforcement in the interior. Democrats vote for increases in border enforcement every year and have forever, for much more than we need, but this is never a conversation about what we need. So there will be some other element. Mm-hmm. And the question is, what is that going to be? The Trump administration, Stephen Miller, in fact, has put forward a crazy set of conditions which are completely unacceptable. But that's because this is a guy who doesn't want his boss to cut a deal. on the doing it. He would like to deport these people. So it's not easy, but we have an opportunity to get it done. And so that's kind of where the focus is.
Wow.